Jim Sciutto is in Hanoi covering an historic summit between the president and Kim Jong-un well into overtime. Jim is working in the Vietnamese capital. But look, this summit happened with not a lot to show for it. We're going to talk about all of that, what happened, what didn't, in a moment. But right now, back stateside in Washington, Michael Cohen is answering questions as we speak behind closed doors before the House Intelligence Committee. It is the third congressional hearing in 3 days for the president's former lawyer and fixer, who's headed off to prison this spring for lying to Congress in part. Jim?
Well, Poppy, even here in Hanoi, amid a summit that we now know was teetering, President Trump was watching Cohen's grueling appearance yesterday before the House Oversight Committee. Here's what he had to say about that testimony earlier this morning.
He lied a lot, but it was very interesting because he didn't lie about one thing. He said no collusion with the Russian hoax. And I said, I wonder why he didn't just lie about that, too, like he did about everything else.
Well, in fact, Cohen said only that he had no direct evidence that the president or his campaign colluded, but he does have suspicions. Of course, he also talked about the president having foreknowledge of the WikiLeaks releases and even that Trump Tower meeting in June 2016, Poppy. That's
right. Let's begin our coverage this hour. Manu Raju is on Capitol Hill. Clearly, Cohen had a lot to get off his chest. He showed things we haven't seen before, like that, $35,000 check that he says was to reimburse him for that hush money payment. But now what, right? Now where does Congress go from here?
Well, this specific committee that Michael Cohen is meeting with today, the House Intelligence Committee, is going to be focused almost exclusively on the Russia issue and those topics that he did bring up yesterday. Adam Schiff, the chairman of the committee, told me they wanted to drill down much further into all those topics that were not fully explored yesterday or may have been broached briefly, including whether there was any White House role in editing those statements and the testimony that he gave that was initially false to this committee back in 2017, in which Michael Cohen initially downplayed the role of the Trump organization and of Trump himself in trying to pursue that Trump Tower Moscow project. The Cohen testified that there were attorneys who were close to the president's attorneys who edited those statements. Now, those attorneys have denied that to be the case, but expect that to be a big focus today. Adam Schiff also is very interested to learn more about the allegation of Michael Cohen that Roger Stone had reached out to then-candidate Trump about his outreach to Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, that they had advance notice of those damaging emails hurting the Clinton campaign. That's something the White House has denied. That's something that Roger Stone has denied, but that's going to be a focus of today and whether there's any corroboration to that as well. So we'll see what they learn, if anything different, but that's at least what we're expected for a full day behind closed doors here, Poppy.
Okay, Manu, thanks very much. Jim.
So we've had a lot of purported turning points in this story from the very beginning. Is this one of them? Is it for real? What does it all mean moving forward? For that, we're joined to discuss now by former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti. So, Renato, today, the Democrats have another crack at Michael Cohen, this time in closed session. After that public testimony yesterday, how do Democratic lawmakers and the Republican colleagues, if they choose to, what can they do in this closed session to follow up on what they heard from Cohen yesterday to move the ball forward?
Well, first, in the interest of full disclosure, I did help one of the members yesterday write questions, so I want to get that out there so everyone knows that. I will say that I do think that the private testimony can be more helpful than the public testimony because, look, all of us who watched the public testimony, I thought there were some very interesting moments. I think some of the members did get useful information. That said, I also, think that there's a lot of wasted time and grandstanding in politics. And I think in closed session, there can be much more. I've read those transcripts of closed session. It can be a lot of staff members getting into the weeds. There was some really good questioning towards the end of the day yesterday where you saw, for example, Ocasio-Cortez walking through some tax issues, Representative Khanna, going through a check and talking about the implications of a check. That sort of in the weeds drilling down, I think is going to be very helpful. And as to this question, as you mentioned a moment ago, Jim, about who was involved with this false testimony to Congress, I thought it was very interesting that he mentioned the name of a lawyer, Jay Sekulow, during the hearing yesterday. Cohen did, and then Sekulow came out with a public statement that didn't fully contradict what Cohen said. It was very carefully worded, and if I was in the committee, I would try to drill into the weeds of exactly what did Sekulow tell you, what did he edit out, what changes did he make, what did he know.
And it's a good point that you raised that, because in the midst of many revelations yesterday, the idea that White House lawyers participated, as Cohen alleged, in his false testimony to the Hill last year, if true, that would be consequential. On the big issue here, was there something that we learned yesterday that raises the bar into the category of high crimes and misdemeanors? You had one Democratic representative, Jackie Speier, who was one of those who questioned Michael Cohen, say, in her words, here I'm quoting, "There's growing evidence that an impeachment pleading can be made." As a lawyer, though, did you hear revelations from Michael Cohen that gave evidence that could be impeachable?
Well, there was a lot of evidence of potential financial wrongdoing with the Trump organization, particularly around those payments. I mean, to me, if you're looking for substance there where we really move the ball forward legally, it's really on two fronts. One is, I mentioned Kana with the check, and looking at this payment from Trump, right? For the first time, we actually saw Trump signed one of the checks that was used to pay Michael Cohen. That was the basis of charges that Michael Cohen's going to be going to prison for. I mean, that, I think, sussing out his level of involvement there, we learned about what Weisselberg's role was there. Trump Jr. signed that check. And there's a lot of interesting details there that the public didn't know before, although I'm sure prosecutors in New York knew, in the Southern District of New York knew. And then similarly, there was a lot of discussion of potential avenues of wrongdoing regarding businesses like taxes and so forth. To me, that's all in the very early stages. In other words, we have charges that prosecutors brought on those hush money payments that could potentially, reach the finish line in the near future. This other stuff, I think, are lines of inquiry that Congress and investigators might have to pursue for years to come.
Yeah, kind of lost in the cloud of revelations. You even had Michael Cohen there raise the possibility that the president's excuse about not releasing his taxes, this idea that they're under audit, may not be true. Anyway, many things to check out going forward. Renato Mariotti, thanks very much. Poppy, quite a moment yesterday. We're going to be digesting that for some time.
We certainly will, and we'll see what we learn from today's closed-door hearing. Let's discuss all of it with Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, of course, one of the members of Congress who questioned Michael Cohen yesterday. Good morning to you, Congresswoman.
Good morning, Poppy.
Thank you for being here. Do you believe, hearing what you heard from Michael Cohen yesterday, that the president committed crimes while in office?
Well, I found Cohen's testimony absolutely alarming. He pointed out possible campaign finance violations, ethics violations, tax and insurance fraud, and other criminal activity. Yes.
So the answer to that is yes. Okay. So do you believe that those crimes that you believe Michael Cohen on apparently rise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors, meaning a threshold for impeachment?
Well, there were a lot of information came out that I wasn't aware of, and we have numerous investigations taking place in Congress, and we'll follow the facts where they take us. I think it possibly could lead to impeachment. When you look at the fact that Cohen is going to jail for hiding the hush payments, and he clearly presented the check that the president signed, that he knew about it, was involved in it, and tried to hide it.
He's also going to jail in part because he lied to Congress. And so I'm interested in your read on this that Michael Cohen said as it pertains to the question of alleged collusion. Let's play it.
Questions have been raised about whether I know of direct evidence that Mr. Trump or his campaign colluded with Russia. I do not.
Do you believe him there?
Well, he is going to jail for lying to Congress. If he lied to us yesterday, he'll be going to jail for longer. I thought one of the most eyebrow-raising moments is when he turned to the Republicans and said, hey, you're doing what I did for 10 years, covering and supporting him when he's doing things that are not appropriate and just plain wrong in many cases.
But
So,
do you find him, Congresswoman, credible yesterday, and do you believe him when he said that he does not have evidence that President Trump or his campaign colluded with Russia?
I believe him. I believe him,
You
and
do
I
believe
believe, and I know he's going to jail because he lied to Congress. If he lied to us yesterday, I know he would be going to jail much longer. There are numerous investigations of private and public sector taking place, and the information is going to come out, and we'll follow it.
I think the follow-up to that, then, is if you do believe him that he has no evidence of any collusion with Russia, although he did mention some suspicions, look how intertwined Michael Cohen was in sort of everything in Trump land, right, during the campaign, and how much the president trusted him with things like alleged, hush money payments. Don't you think he would have known? Do you think he would have known if there was collusion?
I really don't know. But to your point that he was involved in everything in Trump land, what was surprising to me yesterday is how much Mr. Trump was involved in Trump land. He testified that no important meeting took place without briefings before and after from the participants, and that he was completely and totally involved in every decision, every action, and a very hands-on manager of his organization, campaign, and his life.
You asked Michael Cohen a really interesting question, I thought, yesterday, and you said to him, who else should we, Congress as a body, be talking to? And he named David Pecker of AMI, Dylan Howard, Barry Levine of AMI, the parent company of the National Enquirer, Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump Organization, Alan Garten of the Trump Organization. Of those men, to whom do you want to speak with the most, and what is your most pressing question for them?
Well, I think we should follow absolutely every lead that he gave us, and that law enforcement should follow every lead that he gave them. And
but of those men, I guess I'm really interested, because we heard Elijah Cummings, the chair of your committee, say, well, we definitely want to have, we think we'll bring in Alan Weisselberg, for example, who has a limited immunity agreement. What would your most important question be to him?
Weisselberg, he was mentioned more than anyone. His name kept coming up. So if I were to single one particular person, it would be him. He seems to have been involved in the tax, insurance, possible fraud, the campaign finance violations, and the ethics violations. I would have to, there's so many leads. I guess I would go to the Russian collusion and interaction area to question him.
I'm interested, finally, Congresswoman, in where Congress goes from here. What did you learn yesterday that was most critical to where you believe Congress should take this next?
Well, what I learned was how deeply he was involved, meaning the president, in all of the decisions, and there was concrete proof shown, in my opinion, of a campaign finance violation with the payments right before the election to Stormy Daniels, the hush money. I think the leaving off the disclosure on your financial disclosure form, that is a violation of law, and that seemed to be very clear that was a clear violation of law. So I guess I would look at the clear violations of law that came forward. And there were allegations of other violations which we don't have the information on. So there are numerous investigations. We'll follow the facts and see where the facts take us.
Before you go, Congresswoman, the jacket you're wearing, it's a black firefighter's jacket, and there's a reason you're not taking it off. What is that?
Well, I'm working double time. I'm also working to pass the 9/11 Health and Compensation Act. We passed health care for the 9/11 heroes and heroines, but the compensation, those who lost their life and their families have no income now, for those that are now can't work because of the illnesses, the cancers that they have now, we need to replenish the account. It's been cut 70 to 50%, and that's unfair. They were there for us. We need to be there for them. And I pledged to them that I'd keep wearing it until we convinced enough members of Congress to pass them. and pass the legislation and give them the compensation and health care they so justly deserve.
Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Poppy.
Jim.
That fireman's coat, well spotted, Poppy, there, an important issue. Well, before leaving his second summit with Kim Jong-un with no deal, President Trump says that he took the dictator's word that Kim did not know about the mistreatment, the deadly mistreatment of the American student Otto Warmbier. We're going to discuss that.
Plus, a dangerous border crisis is escalating between two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan. What you need to know this morning ahead.
Welcome back. We are live from Hanoi. President Trump says that he could not agree to Kim Jong-un's demands that he remove all U.S. sanctions on North Korea immediately without full denuclearization by North Korea. Yet CNN has learned that the president's top advisors warned him going in that that's exactly what Pyongyang was likely to demand, and that a breakthrough was far from certain, perhaps out of reach even. We're told that the president was surprised and disappointed that he could not bring Kim around when they spoke face-to-face. Joining me now to speak about this, CNN senior diplomatic correspondent Michelle Kosinski and former U.S. Special Envoy for North Korea Policy Joseph Yoon, with a tremendous amount of experience in negotiations just like this. Joseph, if I could begin with you. His advisors warned him, based on their conversations leading up, that North Korea was digging its heels in and unlikely to make concessions, make a significant concession on its nuclear program. The president, according to our reporting, confident that he could get it himself, face to face. Was that a mistaken impression?
I don't think it's a mistaken impression, but he should not have walked into a bad situation.
Yeah.
This is a summit. You know, it's not just an ordinary meeting, summit with enormous amount at stake. So really, the situation should have been better prepared, and if it's not better prepared, he should not have walked in.
Yeah. Twice this has happened now. You walk in, the face-to-face, you got this great loving relationship, and yet you don't walk away with discernible progress. Do you believe that this will change his calculation going forward, make him less likely to do the one-on-one without a clear plan for what's going to be agreed to?
I would certainly hope so. I think there has to be a lot more legwork. You know, summits happen with so much work in between, reams of paperwork, many meetings. I mean, we saw, you know, Steve Biegun, the special representative for North Korea policy, have one meeting in Hanoi. And that's not enough. And that's essentially to draft the joint agreement. You cannot start negotiations with that kind of draft. You start way before. And if it's a bad situation, don't walk in.
You bail before you walk in. Michelle, at the president's news conference earlier this morning, which of course we should note was moved up when a working lunch and a signing ceremony were canceled, Trump was asked what exactly he wants from Kim Jong-un. Have a listen to his answer.
Are you still thinking that you want North Korea to give up everything to do complete, verifiable
I don't want to say that
before
to you.
You lift sanctions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't want to say that to you because I don't want to put myself in that position from the standpoint of negotiation. But, you know, we want a lot to be given up, and we're giving up. And we'll have to, you know, we'll be helping them along economically, us and many other countries.
We want a lot to be given up. He didn't say we continue to want complete denuclearization. Based on your conversations, Michelle, did the president move the goalpost there?
They have been moving the goalposts somewhat, but it's mostly in just the way it's presented. I mean, we've gone from many times, several members of this administration saying no sanctions removal until complete denuclearization. We've heard that so many times. It's only when you drill down and have more conversations with these people that you start to hear, again, multiple members of the administration, from Steve Biegun to Pompeo and now President Trump, saying, well, there's some nuance there, obviously. He didn't want to state today complete denuclearization is the only way we're going to remove sanctions, because there is nuance to the sanctions. I think one of the things that could have happened here, if they had gotten enough from North Korea, was to not remove the tougher UN sanctions that are on North Korea. They insist they want to keep that pressure on, but they could have done something like removing some of the secondary sanctions on countries, that preventing them from trading with North Korea, for example. They could have allowed more trade between South Korea and North Korea to kind of sweeten the deal. But they do insist they want to keep the bulk of the pressure on until complete denuclearization.
Joseph Yun, a young American, was taken hostage by North Korea, Otto Warmbier. He was sent home brain damaged, and he died when he was home. President Trump asked about it today, said that he took Kim Jong-un at his word when he denied any involvement or knowledge in this. This is the third time the president has taken the word of a dictator. Vladimir Putin on election interference, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and now Kim Jong-un. Tell me about the damage that does to America's standing and defense of human rights as a matter of policy, national policy.
Well, you know, Jim, I'm very familiar with Otto Warmbier case, and he became sick in March 2016, and when we got him out, it was June 2017. So to say that Kim Jong-un did not know about it, well, to me, it is not credible, and I just cannot really accept that.
I mean, it's a great point about the time frame there. For the president, it's a top-heavy organization in that country in terms of leadership. So for that whole year, it's just incredible to claim that he would not know or have been involved or been updated on it.
Yeah, and human rights is a very important pillar of our foreign policy, and we cannot dismiss it. And I think one big disappointment of mine is that the current U.S. administration have really put very little priority on human rights. Ultimately, even if we reach a deal with North Korea, we're going to have to discuss human rights, you know? There is no escape.
Not a priority, even de-emphasizing, you might say. Ambassador Joseph Yun, Michelle Kaczynski, thanks very much. Well, back in Washington, it is day 3 of testimony on Capitol Hill from the president's longtime lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, as the fallout from yesterday's stunning revelations on the Hill keeps growing.
All right, the president's former attorney, Michael Cohen, is back on Capitol Hill today behind closed doors, testifying before the House Intelligence Committee. This follows a day of explosive public testimony, Republicans getting used to the Democrats leading these committees, and Democrats trying to determine where this Cohen testimony takes them next. But in all the back and forth, did we lose sight of what we really learned yesterday, Jim?
Here with us to discuss, CNN political director David Chalian. And David, this is a frequent phenomenon here, right? So much news comes across the transom, it's hard to take stock. But help us take stock with how, if at all, Michael Cohen's testimony and revelations move the dial here. Does it, for instance, move the dial closer to Democrats seeking, possibly, impeachment of the president?
Well, it's a good question, Jim. I think we have to look at this two ways. A little bit more micro, sort of what investigative threads did Michael Cohen leave behind for Democratic members of Congress to sort of pull at going forward? Clearly, insurance fraud, bank fraud, tax fraud kind of allegations having nothing to do with Russia, of course, but just into potential wrongdoing that the president may or his organization may have been engaged in. So that's sort of on the immediate investigative threads. But to your point of where we are in the larger picture here of Donald Trump's standing after Michael Cohen delivered what was clearly damning testimony yesterday, it is a sign of the times, I think, that the American people got more evidence yesterday, Jim and Poppy, than at any time in the last 2 years that Donald Trump was likely committing a crime, a part of committing a crime as President of the United States, and yet I am skeptical that Americans' minds are going to be changed. The perceptions about Donald Trump are so locked in, and yet the country just heard more convincing evidence than ever that he actually may have committed a crime. That is the state of our politics right now and where we are as a people.
And David, I think you're so right, and what I wonder is if that's why we really didn't hear the word impeachment, the I word, from Democrats yesterday, and we haven't heard a ton of it in the aftermath. Yes, Representative Jackie Speer mentioned the possibility, but Democrats aren't jumping all over that following the testimony, and that's, I wonder if that's because impeachment is a political mechanism, and they see what you see.
Without a doubt, Poppy, and I think it is a really smart observation. When I heard Nancy Pelosi give remarks yesterday to reporters, and she said she hadn't been watching all day, but then she followed up by saying very clearly, I am not looking to get involved in all of this. My job is to fight the president as hard as possible on his policy positions, on his tax cuts for the wealthy, on what he's trying to do with stripping away health care. She went right back. She did not sound like a speaker who was trying to lead her party in the aftermath of that testimony towards impeachment. She sounded like she was trying to pull them away from that.
You're right.
Yeah, she knows that a number of the gains Democrats made in the midterm elections were in flip districts where relatively moderate Democrats were able to flip. And you're a couple months into her leadership, and Democrats, you have the wall issue, you have the Cohen testimony, a couple talking about impeachment there. But no progress or less progress so far on the bigger issues of what was an ambitious Democratic agenda. Is that a danger for the Democratic Party?
I doubt they're much in danger yet. I mean, yesterday they did pass in the House a gun control legislation, a big promise on the campaign trail, but obviously that's not going to go anywhere in the Senate. I mean, I think that'll be the story, right, that the House will pass big agenda items, but likely to be blocked in the Republican-controlled Senate and not get to the president's desk. But they'll be able to move through some of their big agenda items. But I think that the Democrats would tell you, Jim, that the shutdown over the wall allowed them to talk to some of their key items because they were on the political winning side of that shutdown, obviously, when the president caved on that. I do think that you are right to note that much of the Democratic majority, the reason they're in the majority, is because a lot of Republican districts were flipped. So you do have these more moderate members, but there is also a real tension with the Democratic base that wants to see every day Donald Trump be held accountable, and a portion of that base really does want to see impeachment proceedings begin.
Yeah, it's a good point, and this is sort of the tightrope that they're walking. David, always good to have you. Thanks,
guys.
Still ahead.